I didn't know what to do. Me and this girl, we were dating pretty heavy, and I said, "This is what happened." And she said, "Well, this is what we're going to do. You're going to give the keys to your house back to the bank. Give your car back to the bank. Come live with me, and I'll take care of you." Welcome to the Recovery Valve Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Kennedy. Today's episode is brought to you by Bagwell Insurance, Barrow Walden, Tree Guys with Ties. And a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Valve Podcast. And I said, okay. And I did that. I don't know why I did that, but I did that. She became like my drinking buddy. We were drinking box wine. We were drinking beer. We were doing Coke. You know, I was traveling to go get Coke for us. So, I mean, she became like my person. I asked her to marry me. We got married. And so I had to file bankruptcy, and that bankruptcy stays with you for 10 years. So, I mean, I had zero credit. I gave up everything for her. That was my own doing, though. And we started our life together, living primarily her as the primary breadwinner. I would do these different jobs. Her dad helped me get a job as a firefighter in Burke County. I would go over there, and that's when I really, really started drinking a lot. I was drinking in the morning. I was drinking because the schedule was different. At least that's what I blamed it on. The schedule was different. So like I would get off at 7:00 in the morning. And so that became my afternoon. I also had a job before that working at the jail in Aiken County. And I hated that job. I think I had that job for maybe 3 months. Hated. Let me tell you this again. I hated working at that jail. Later, I would go to that jail for DUI. But anyway, we decided to start a family together. She had a daughter from her first marriage, and then her and I got together, and we have two little boys together. I would say that I found so much comfort from being taken care of and having. I was not the breadwinner, and there wasn't much expected from me, that I just kind of was. I just sucked as a husband and as a dad in that first few years. I realized after, I think we were married probably 5 years, 6 years, I really started to realize I had a problem. She had a boss that had involvement with AA. So she's like, you need to try AA, to help you quit drinking. I went to a couple meetings. I just did not like it. But I got so sick of how alcohol made me feel to where I had to have it in the morning time. And I was going to get cocaine. So if I got off of work at 7:00 in the morning, I would drink a 6-pack. I would load my youngest son in the car. He was in his car seat. And I would drive an hour down the road to go get like $20 worth of cocaine. I would come back and I would play the Wii all day long. I would snort cocaine off of a plate, and I would just put him in a bouncer seat, and he sat in that thing all day long till his mama got home. And maybe we'd change his diapers and put some clothes on him. And then another son came along not long after that. And you would think that these milestone moments, I remember them and I'll cherish them for forever. But they didn't change me. They didn't make me want to be better. I just knew that I had made some kids. I did get a DUI. I got my first DUI. She had helped me get a truck, so I was driving my truck. It's a nice truck. But I had drank that morning, and I was on the way to get some cocaine. And I flipped my truck on I-20. And when I came to on the side of the road, I remember looking, and I saw Cameron's car seat. And I'm like, I've thrown my kid out of the car. But I'd blacked out. This was at like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I had dropped him off. Thank goodness. He wasn't even with me. I went to jail. My wife got me out. And there would be times like I would go and that didn't change me. I would still use a lot of cocaine with that buddy of mine. I would leave the house for a day and stay gone for that whole day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days max. Sometimes I would just wouldn't show up. And it got so bad to the point where we separated. By then, I had a stepdaughter. I had my oldest son, and my youngest son came along. And I checked myself into a mental hospital in Aiken called Aurora. And I thought if I started making these steps, it would help, because the AA thing wasn't the way I wanted to go. So I went to Aurora and Aiken for, I don't know, a week or two. That was a good detox place, but it didn't like give you a counselor or help you walk through this. I was still working as a firefighter in Burke County. I was on some kind of a leave that would protect me from losing my job. I came back. I didn't live with my wife. She didn't want to be with me. I don't blame her. The second DUI I had gotten was on our anniversary. Like when I got out, we were trying to work things out. And on our anniversary, we went out to a Mexican restaurant. I ran into a guy that I met in jail who had some pain pills. I took those pain pills. I was drinking. We got in a fight. I took her home. I still wanted a burrito for whatever reason. So I drove to Taco Bell, and I passed out at Taco Bell because at this point I was drinking Canadian Club. I could drink a pint, and I was drinking a pint in the morning. If I could drink any during the day, I would sneak some drinks during the day, and then at night I was drinking a pint to a half liter of Canadian Club with a can of Diet Coke. And I got to the Taco Bell drive-through window and I passed out drunk, and so I went to jail for a second time. Well, in Columbia County, or in the state of Georgia, if you get 2 DUIs within 5 years, they put this thing on your car that you have to blow into to keep it running or to crank it. You have this really expensive insurance, and my wife did not want to pay for any of that, and I didn't blame her. And so I'd moved out on my own. I was living in a shelter for abused women outside of Hepzibah, Georgia. So I could stay close to my job in Burke County. I had this one room. It had the bottom bunk of a bunk bed was my bed. That, like, the poles were cut off, and that bottom bunk was my bunk. It had a refrigerator and a TV on the top of a dresser. It had a toilet that sat out in the middle of the room. And the only rule was, don't talk to the women that live here and don't drink here. I said, no problem. Well, that was a ball-faced lie. I drank every day there. Now, I didn't talk to the women. They were older, not attractive to me, and so that was easy. But I would get to see the boys every other weekend, and I remember looking at where I was bringing them to, and they would play on this old playground. I was miserable watching them play. I knew they were only going to be there for like 45 minutes to an hour hanging out. And this was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is where I got myself to. And it was not long after that, I'd say maybe a month. The guy that owned the place, he also lived there. So this was like this compound. He had this house, and then he built on this house and added all these rooms, and that's what he rented out. And he came to me one night and he said, look, I found your liquor bottles in the trash. And you've been coming home at like 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't live here anymore. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless. I had no idea where else I could go. I couldn't go back to where my wife and the kids lived at. I couldn't go all the way where my parents lived at. That was like an hour and a half away from work. And so I tried to kill myself. And I remember talking to one of the women that were there, and I said, hey, I got a headache. Do you have any Tylenol? And she said, yeah, matter of fact, I just went to Sam's and got this. She had one of these big old Sam's Club bottles of Tylenol. I had just had strep throat. I had a few pain pills, and I knew it was like my last night there. So I wrote a suicide note. and I was very, very specific in the note about what I wanted, what songs I wanted played at my funeral. So this is where it gets heavy. So it gets better. I wanted Fleetwood Mac played at my funeral. I wanted the people that had pissed me off to know how mad I was at them, because I wanted them to carry some kind of a burden. So I wrote that in there. I told my kids goodbye and that I was a bad person. And I told my wife goodbye. I started just taking these. I got real drunk, and I found this drug where you sniff it, and it just really it makes you kind of like blank out for like 15 minutes. So I was taking handfuls of Tylenol. I had some leftover medicine from when I had strep, and I had a few pain pills. I had 2 pints of Canadian Club and a Diet Coke or a Diet Cola or whatever you want to call it. And I just started taking handfuls of pills. And at some point, I must have called my brother. And I don't know how, but he got in touch with the guy that lived there that owned this place. And I was passing out. I was dying in that room. And this man came in there and he found me and he started he put his hands on me and started praying and like trying to wake me up. And then the next time I woke up, I was in the back of an ambulance and this girl was sticking ammonia tabs up my nostrils and she was doing a sternum rub and trying to wake me up, and they were starting to, get IVs going in me. And then I passed back out. And then the next time I woke up, I was at MCG, downtown Augusta. And they were pumping potassium in my veins to counteract the Tylenol. And so I remember this guy came in, a little short fella, had the biggest ears I'd ever seen. And he leaned over my bed and he said, "You're going to Georgia Regional. You'll be in my custody. You won't see your family for a long time." And I said, "That's not going to happen." I remember my mom and dad walked in and my mom broke down. She was crying because, this is not the life they wanted. It may not have been the life that they grew up in. They tried their best to do different, but this isn't the life they wanted for their kids. They didn't want it to be generational, but this wasn't even generational. Neither one of them had ever gotten to this point. And so I begged them. I said, "Please, please, 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 let me come live with you. I can't go to this Georgia Regional place. This is like where they eat their poop and, fight and kill each other at this place. I cannot go there. This is different than jail." And I'd been in jail. So my mom and dad took me home. I was 30 years old by now, and I was living back at home. And it was hard. It was hard for them. It was hard for me because I didn't stop anything. If anything, I was drinking more because of depression and anxiety. I got to see the boys like every other weekend. But I had one little bit of hope that came in. I was serving tables again at 30. Not there's anything wrong with that. I'm just not good at it. But I got offered a job with the town of Wagner, where I grew up at, the place that I hated so much that I wanted to get away from. So I took the job. I was able to afford this little trailer that happened to be the trailer that Aunt Audrey's dad lived in when he was like 90 years old. So I rented from the lady that was my babysitter. And now she's really, really old by now. She's dying of cancer. I start living there, and this place was small. The doors didn't swing open. They slid into the wall. You couldn't fit anything bigger than a queen size bed in the master bedroom at the end of the hall. It was one of those old trailers that had 2 front doors on it. And all that'll make sense in a minute. Everybody knew my business. I started buying crack every day. I would go cut grass as soon as I got off work to get enough money to, get 20 or 40 bucks so I can go get some crack. I was starting to drink the cheapest liquor I could get. It was like $6 for a whole liter every day. And it wasn't until the mayor of the town came to me. I've been working there for maybe 6 months. This was in like August. He came to me and he said, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I'd never been asked that before. And I said, "No." "Why do you ask that?" He said, because we've had like 2 broken water lines on the weekend, and every time you show up, you're hammered. And he said, the people that live here, you're asking them for water to drink because you're so dehydrated, and you reek of alcohol. And I think you're doing it during the day whenever you're supposed to be at work. And I said, mm-mm. But he was right. I was drinking on the lawnmower when I was cutting grass in town. I was smoking crack on my lunch break. I was stealing pills from residents, one of them being Ann Ordry, who's dying of cancer, and I was eating her pain pills. And the day that he asked me that, it has to be in September, because that night I tried to kill myself again. I was like, this is it. And so I went to the Piggly Wiggly in town where I worked at when I was, in high school. And I remember going and getting 3 little bottles of Tylenol PM. I'd also gotten the metal thing you clean your dishes with, because you can use that to make crack pipes, or the filter for your crack pipe. And I went home, and I had this little trailer, and I had pawned everything in that trailer. If the dope man needed a washer and dryer, he got a washer and dryer. I would get it from somewhere. If his kids needed toys, I would take my toys from my kids that I got to see them every other weekend, and I would give them toys. He needed a kitchen table. I gave him a kitchen table. At the end of my addiction, I was up to about $600 a week in crack. I was smoking or drinking about half a gallon a day of Canadian Club, and snorting cocaine and taking pills, in there if I could. Smoking a little bit of weed, wasn't my jam, but that day that the mayor asked me if I was an alcoholic, I went home and I looked around. I had no furniture in any of the bedrooms. The kids had 0 toys. I had a bed on just the rails in the living room. I had 1 TV. I had no air. And this was like August, September. It had to be September. It was hot. So I had a fan going. I had the bottom, like a military cot. That was my couch. Now I was dating this girl, and I met her in DUI school. She was very sweet. She was like 9 months pregnant when we started dating, which I stayed so drunk I didn't care. She was coming down every once in a while, and she was trying, to help me feel like a regular person. But when he asked me that, I remember going and getting those bottles of Tylenol, it was Tylenol PM. And I took those 3 bottles of Tylenol PM, and I woke up the next morning like I wake up every morning. It was, I don't know if it was I don't know if it was like it was counteracted with crack, or like, I don't know. I don't know if I don't remember throwing up. The very next morning, it was Friday. I was broke. We got paid on Thursday. They moved my pay from Friday because I would be broke on Monday. So they moved my pay back one day. I would get paid on Thursday. I was broke on Friday. I know that this was a Thursday because the next morning I woke up. It was Friday. I went to the dope man's house. On the way to the dope man's house, I wrecked my car. Like, not wrecked it, like it was raining, and I slid off. I was in this Chrysler Concorde that I bought from this dude in Augusta. And it was wet on this dirt road. This guy lived off a dirt road onto another dirt road back onto this main road. It was very weird. But I was trying to get there so fast. I remember sliding my car into the embankment, and I got out. I hadn't bathed in probably a week. I had on a cargo shorts. I had on flip flops, and I had a t-shirt on. And these were my best clothes, because I wore a uniform every day for this town. And I remember getting out of that car, and I started walking in those flip flops back up the dirt road, this orange clay dirt road, to this field. It was a cotton field. And it was the first time I ever had like a moment of clarity. I got to the middle of this field, and I'm like, okay, I've wrecked my car. Where am I going to go? Like, what am I on the way to go do? Am I on the way to go ask someone to come help me get my car out? And when I do, what am I going to do after that? My car is going to be so filthy on the inside from all this mud. And so I remember like looking around, and it was the first time I ever like tried to have a conversation with God. Like I never went to church. I did a couple of times. I like wanted to know more about it. I didn't have like a relationship with Jesus or with Christ as any kind of relationship like that. And so I remember looking around. Now in jail, I talked to God, like, I need to get out of here and I need you to help me. That's the relationship I had with God. But it was in that moment, that morning, it was early in the morning and it was raining. And I remember standing in that field and I said, okay, if you're real, if you're really, really real, I need you to help me. And nothing happened. I mean, the sky didn't light up white. These white doves or pigeons didn't fly to these pine trees. It didn't stop raining. Nothing happened. But I did turn around and I started walking back to my car. Now, as I walked back, I remember passing this little small farmhouse type shed on the side of the dirt road. Nobody lived there. It was really old and run down. So I went inside of that shed and I got on my butt and I kicked the wood off of that shed. I said, if I can use this as traction, I can put it under my tires. It'll get traction instead of spinning on that mud. Because all I need to do is the car went into the embankment. All I needed to do was get traction and back it up. So I got like a bundle of wood and walked back to my car with it. When I got there, I remember getting on my hands and knees, and the tire tread rubbed the top of my hands, and I dug down in there and I pulled as much mud as I could out. I mean, and I was just orange from all this mud, but I took that wood and shoved it under, because this was a front wheel drive car. And so I shoved it under this side and I shoved it under this side. And I just got in the car and I said, I don't care if I blow this car up. I'm going to get out of this. And so I got in the car, crunk it up, and I just laid on the gas pedal. And the wood started to smoke from the friction of the tires and the wood. But it came out, popped right out. And you would think that I would have some kind of epiphany of some kind after just having that moment of clarity, and I got unstuck, but I didn't. I put it in drive and drove straight to the dope man's house. I asked him for $60 worth of crack. I didn't have one dime on me. I said, look, just front it to me this time. I'll bring you some money back this afternoon. I had like a pint of liquor. That was the last time I saw that dope man that morning. This was mid-September. I left his house. I went to a cemetery. I have no idea why I went to the cemetery. It was just way off the beaten path. So I went to the cemetery. I smoked the $60 worth of crack. I drank the liquor, and I was sober. Sober, like did not feel anything. You thought I was smoking soap and drinking water. And I had been sold soap before because people were trying to pass it off as crack. And I drove back to my little trailer. By now it's 8:30 in the morning, maybe 9 o'clock. And I called into work, said, hey, I'm not coming into work. And what I didn't know was around town, if I didn't get a chance to cut grass or do any side work in the afternoons, I was borrowing money, which was considered, I didn't know the definition then, but it's called panhandling. And because I would use that money to go feed my habit. And people had filed complaints. And so the mayor of the town, my mama, and two cops rolled up to this little trailer where I lived at. They had two front doors. I couldn't escape. I couldn't go out the back door. And what am I going to run from? But one of the cops walked in and he said, what have you got? And we just kind of looked around the room, and there were just liquor bottles laying on the floor. They were ranging from this size to this size. I had to cut my own plumbing off, and I worked for the water department, but I had to show that it had been cut off a couple of times. I was urinating in cups. My house was just a wreck. And I said, I got a pipe, because he said, do you have anything on you? Because we're going to take you to jail. But to kind of get rid of some of the charges, do you have anything that you want to give us now? And I said, yeah, I got a pipe. So I pulled the pipe out and I gave it to him. And they put handcuffs on me and they took me to jail. Well, before they did that, I laid in that living room, in that bed, And I look back now and I think this was a part of the moment of clarity from when I asked God to kind of show himself, because out of all those liquor bottles, for whatever reason, I had the Yellow Pages. For you young folks, the Yellow Pages is like a phone book. But there was a phone book in my living room, and I opened it up to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told that person on the other line, like, my story, a condensed version. And they said, "Hey, do you have insurance?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got, because I work for this local government, I've got state benefits." And they said, "Look on the back of your insurance card and call the number for mental health, and they will get you into a treatment program. You need an inpatient treatment program. That's how sick you are." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I called. All this happened before the cops got there. I called in this place called the Watershed in Florida. I told them the story, and they said, "Yeah, we'll have you on a plane this afternoon. You can fly down to Florida, and we'll put you through a 30-day treatment program." And when the cops got there and I gave them the pipe, and they asked, "Is there anything else?" I said, "Well, I just called and I got help. I'm going to go get help today." And they said, "No, you're going to go to jail today." So I went to jail. I was in jail for, I think it was 8 days. I was on protective custody because I went to the jail where I had worked at before. And then I got put into general population, and I stayed there for that time. And when I went in front of the judge, my mom was there to represent me, and I was released into her care, but it was under a couple of conditions. I had 24 hours to call that place back and say, "Hey, I still want to go to treatment." I had to prove that I was going to go do a 30-day treatment. Well, when I called that place back, when I got out, they said, "How long were you in jail for?" And I said, "Probably just a little over a week." And they said, "Oh, well, we can't take you. You've detoxed at this point." I said, "So if I'm high or drunk, you'll take me?" I said, "I'll call you back in 15 minutes. So I took some pills and I started drinking, and I called them back, and they laughed. They said, "It doesn't work like that. You can't just start using after detox and then try to get help." And I said, "Okay." So then I called around. I did not want to go to prison. I was facing prison time, felony panhandling charges, which is stupid, but it's legit real. And I did not want to go to jail or prison. So I called around, and this place called Florida Center for Recovery took my call, and I told them my story. And I said, I've decided to use now because I don't want time in jail to be considered detox. I still want to get help. Well, that next day, they said, "We'll fly you down to Florida." This place was in Florida too. "We'll fly you down to Florida." It's West Palm Beach. I said, "Perfect, I'll take it." They said, "You have 24 hours to say goodbye to your kids," who I was getting to see every other weekend. I couldn't afford the child support that I was ordered to pay. So they weren't getting any kind of income other than what their mom could provide them. And I said my goodbyes to them, and I said my goodbyes to my parents. And I jumped on this plane, and it went from Columbia to Atlanta, and Atlanta down to Florida. This was on the 26th of September of 2010. The last drink I ever took, because they told me to keep drinking. They said, "You need to keep drinking on the plane because you'll start having these DTs." I said, "Okay, no problem." So I got to the Atlanta airport, and I never really liked Jaeger bombs, but for whatever reason, there was a sale at this one bar on Jaeger bombs. I said, "Well, give me 6 of those." So I was doing Jaeger bombs. That was the last drink I ever took. The week before, or 9 days before, it was the last time I used crack. And then I went to this treatment facility, and I knew going in there that this was it for me. Like, I had tried to kill myself twice. I had one moment of clarity. I had an opportunity to never see the drug man again, who would probably kill me if I didn't pay him his $60. My parents were done with me. My estranged wife was done with me. My kids were too young. They didn't have any idea what was going on. So I could really change in this moment. Thanks for watching and listening to the Recovery Vow podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow along on all of our social media platforms. A huge shout out to all of our sponsors. You can find a list of them in the show notes below or on the screen you're watching on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Today's episode is brought to you by Roof Savers, Kendrick Paint and Body, Game Changers, City of Refuge, Augusta Magazine, Burrow Elijah, Attorney at Law, Communigraphics, The Nonprofit Desk, Corbin Jones State Farm, Paradise Turf, Sally Kohler Photography, Atlas Health and Wellness, Dr. Rhonda Milner, Kendra Neal Studio, Augusta Dream Center, Newsom Electric, New Spring Church, Augusta Lawn and Turf, Candace Riddle Realty, Goldneck, Norval Fixture and Equipment, S&S Supplies, Belinda Thompson, Rhett Walker, Carpet Cleaning Pros of Augusta, Coleman Construction. And a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Valve podcast.